No one in the small village of Kacheri, hidden deep within the dusty plains of India, could have ever imagined that one of the world's richest men would one day walk their narrow, unpaved streets. It happened quietly, without any announcement, without cameras or crowds, without even his usual security detail. For years, Bill Gates had funded countless programs across the developing world: vaccines, schools, clean water, and technology. But he had rarely seen the raw, unfiltered truth of what those efforts looked like at ground level. So one night, without notifying his foundation's team or alerting the press, he made a decision that surprised even himself. He wanted to see, with his own eyes, what life was really like for the people whose lives he was trying to improve. He called only one trusted associate, told him to arrange a low-profile visit, and asked for complete anonymity. No official cars, no hotels, no PR statements, just him, a translator, and the truth. He landed quietly at a small rural airstrip just before dawn, dressed simply in jeans, a faded shirt, and a cap pulled low over his eyes. No one would have recognized him. To the villagers, he looked like any other foreign traveler or aid worker. His car, a dusty, old SUV, rattled down a bumpy road lined with cracked fields and humble huts. He could see children running barefoot, old women carrying water pots on their heads, and men bent over working in the early morning heat. He had seen photos like this in reports, of course, but seeing it in real life was something else entirely. Every face told a story of resilience, of survival, of dreams deferred. When he arrived at the village, people watched curiously, but didn't crowd him. They were used to visitors who came, asked a few questions, took pictures, and left. No one knew this quiet stranger was the man whose name appeared on so many donation plaques and relief programs. He first stopped at the local school, a crumbling, one-room building with faded blue paint and broken windows. Inside, about 20 children sat on the floor with worn-out books and wide, bright eyes. The teacher, an elderly man named Raghavan, was writing math problems on a blackboard that looked like it hadn't been replaced in decades. Bill quietly sat at the back, observing. The children noticed him but continued studying. When class ended, he approached the teacher, introduced himself only as Mr. William, and asked questions about the school's needs. Raghavan smiled wearily. "We need many things, sir. Books, fans, chalk, a roof that doesn't leak. But most of all, we need hope." That line struck him. Hope. It wasn't something you could buy or build easily. It had to be nurtured, believed in, and passed down. After the class, Bill sat with the children under a banyan tree. They giggled shyly, fascinated by his pale skin and gentle voice. One small boy, maybe 7 years old, asked in broken English, "Sir, you from TV?" Bill smiled and shook his head. "No, just visiting." The boy grinned. "You look like that computer man?" Bill laughed softly, realizing the irony. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe I do." He spent the rest of the morning walking through the village, talking to families, listening to their stories. A woman named Mira invited him into her small mud house. She had 2 daughters, both of whom dreamed of becoming doctors, but had no access to secondary school. She showed him the small solar panel that powered a single light bulb, one that had been donated through a global program funded by his foundation. When she said, "This light changed our nights," Bill felt something shift inside him. For the first time, he wasn't reading a statistic about 2 million homes electrified. He was sitting inside one of them, feeling the warmth of its impact. As the day grew hotter, he walked toward the village well, where women stood in line to collect water. He watched as one mother carefully filled her pot, not wasting a single drop. The well had been installed 2 years earlier as part of a sanitation initiative, another project connected indirectly to his foundation's work. Seeing it in person made him emotional. It wasn't just infrastructure, it was dignity. Clean water meant fewer diseases, fewer missed school days, fewer deaths. And here he was, watching that change unfold in real life, not as a graph or a headline, but as life itself. Later that afternoon, as he sat under the shade of a tree, an old farmer named Karim joined him. The man's face was wrinkled and sunburnt from decades of labor. He spoke through a translator. People come here and promise help, but they forget us after the photos. Why are you here? Bill paused for a long time before answering. I wanted to see if what I've done has really helped. Karim studied him silently, then said, If you helped one child to smile today, then it has. Those words stayed with Bill the entire evening. That night, Bill refused the offer to stay in a city hotel. Instead, he slept on a simple cot in a villager's home. The roof leaked, insects buzzed, and the air was thick with humidity. But he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt such calm. He lay awake, listening to the sounds of crickets and distant laughter. He realized how detached his own world had become. Meetings, strategies, and polished reports, all of it distant from the heartbeat of real human struggle. Here, life was raw but honest. People had so little yet shared everything. They had no luxury, but they had gratitude. The next morning, before sunrise, he walked down to the edge of the fields where the farmers were already at work. He picked up a handful of soil, letting it fall slowly through his fingers. It was warm, alive, and real. For decades, he had been surrounded by technology and numbers, but here was something far more profound, a reminder that every program, every donation, every initiative was ultimately about people like these. It wasn't about scale or fame. It was about humanity. Before leaving, he met again with the teacher, the farmer, and Mira's family. He thanked them for sharing their world with him. The teacher asked if he would return. Bill smiled gently. Maybe not as this person, but as someone who understands better. As his car drove away, he looked out the window one last time at the children waving. Something inside him broke and healed at the same time. When he finally returned to his foundation's headquarters days later, no one knew where he had been. His assistant handed him a thick stack of reports, schedules, and financial summaries. But Bill barely glanced at them. He walked straight to his office window, looked out at the bustling city below, and whispered to himself, "We measure too much in numbers and too little in smiles." That day, he called his entire senior team for a private meeting. For 2 hours, he spoke not about profits or projections, but about purpose. "We've been trying to change the world from the top down," he said. "Maybe we need to start listening from the bottom up. The people we're helping are not just beneficiaries, they are our teachers." His team sat in silence, surprised by his tone. Something had clearly changed in him. In the following months, he quietly redirected several projects, emphasizing community feedback, transparency, and personal storytelling. He began sending smaller, ground-level teams to live among the communities they served, to understand their realities firsthand. "Don't bring them data," he told his staff. "Bring them dignity." A few months later, a journalist interviewing him asked, "Mr. Gates, what drives your philanthropy now?" Bill paused for a moment and said, "A smile from a child in a place no one visits." The journalist didn't understand the full meaning behind those words, but the people of Kacheri would have. Years passed, and the village changed slowly. The school was rebuilt, new wells were dug, and a small computer lab was installed. A letter arrived one day for teacher Rahaven. It was unsigned but enclosed a simple note: "To those who taught me what real progress means." Inside the envelope was enough funding to build a library and provide scholarships for every child who wanted to continue school. Raghavan smiled knowingly. "Mr. William," he whispered. The truth of that visit remained a secret for years. Only a few locals ever knew who he really was, and they kept it to themselves. But for Bill Gates, it became one of the most defining experiences of his life. A reminder that beyond all wealth, innovation, and global influence, true greatness lies in humility and connection. Sometimes you have to step into the simplest places to rediscover the deepest truths. When asked later in an interview what success meant to him, he smiled softly and said, "Success is when the people you'll never meet still feel your kindness." Few understood the depth of that statement, but those who had seen him walk through that dusty village road, barefoot children waving, farmers smiling, knew exactly what he meant. Because in that moment, Bill Gates wasn't the world's richest man. He was simply a man who had remembered what humanity really looks like.